Thomas is a tank engine who lives at a big station on the island of Sodor. He's a cheeky little engine with 6 small wheels, a short stumpy funnel, a short stumpy boiler, and a short stumpy dome.
40 years ago, those words were broadcasted on TV stations all across the UK. And what came after was a boom in popularity that eventually brought the same tank engine before a 1-year-old me. This is the story of how Thomas the Tank Engine and friends impacted my life.
Most everyone who loves the show knows its history, but if you only know Thomas from when you were a kid, or are a relatively new fan of the show, or are basically anyone else, then you probably should know a few things first. Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends is a TV show created by Britt Allcroft and is based on the Railway series books written by Reverend Wilbert W. Audrey. The show was created by filming Gauge 1 model props on handcrafted sets, which helped the show stand out amongst other children's shows at the time. It was slower paced and felt like a storybook, but it didn't talk down to its young target audience, unlike most children's shows do today. And what's a storybook without a narrator? Enter Ringo Starr of the Beatles. Yes, the Ringo Starr. He narrated the first 2 seasons of the show, before leaving it in 1990 to focus on his music career. Thanks to the show's popularity, Britt eventually sought to expand the audience overseas, specifically to the United States. And in 1989, the show came to the States on a variety show called Shining Time Station. The American version of the show also had their own narrator in the form of George Carlin. Carlin has stated he wanted to do the show to help people see he could be less crass. While a nice sentiment, this has led to people doing the hilarious thing of going back to some of his old comedy sets and splicing them together with episodes that have his dubbing.
The signalman ran up. "Hello, Thomas," he said. "What are you doing here?"
"I'm looking for an antique lamp sticking out of a clown's,"
said Thomas.
For the next few years, things played out as many have covered beforehand. Episodes were made fairly regularly, and the show continued to stay quite popular. But this all took place in the 90s, and I wasn't alive then. So, the first memories I have of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, while still at a young age, would not happen until after I was born in 2002. While I can't say for certain, I believe my first episode of Thomas I remember watching was the Season 8 episode, Fish. In this episode, Thomas is tasked to help Arthur with delivering a large load of fish from the harbor to Brindham Docks. Arthur tells Thomas he's got to go slow with only a few trucks at a time. Thomas doesn't listen and wrecks into Salty. He gets in trouble for having caused confusion and delay.
He said it!
Then, he completes the job on time after having learned to follow the rules. Typical Season 8 stuff. Now, while not the most mind-blowing episode, it's stuck with me for a few reasons. Those 3 being Arthur, Salty, and Harvey. Not the crash, not the big lesson of the episode, but 3 starkly different engines that were in this episode. Harvey, while not a huge favorite of mine, has always been top 10 for me, and that's because I grew up on hit stuff mostly. Salty's nice too. I always enjoyed the piratey voice the narrators gave him. It was something else that helped set him apart from everyone else. Plus, he was a nice diesel, and seeing as I didn't have much home media with Daisy or Boko, he and Mavis were my only 2 good diesels I had exposure to. And last, but most importantly to me, is Arthur, the big red tank engine that has always stuck with me. His big long boiler, 262 wheel configuration, and maroon livery adorned with his yellow London, Midland, and Scottish Railway lettering helped him stand out from the cast. He was basically my duck, because as I said earlier, my home media was limited to mostly hit-era episodes. I also had a take-along toy for Arthur that is currently in storage at my parents' house in Colorado. I was going to have my dad get a picture of him, but I forgot to ask him to do so. So here's a stock photo from Google. You can't see it, but my Arthur was very useful and a loved engine on my railway due to all the scuffs and scratches his paint has collected. This episode, Thomas and the other 3 stuck with me and ignited a passion for the show. When we moved to Germany in 2005, I was given a bunch of new wooden track and began to grow an assorted collection of both Thomas Wooden Railway and take-along engines, all of which are currently being stored at my parents' house along with Arthur. Again, I was going to get a picture of said collection, but I forgot to ask my dad to do so. They reside in that tub until little cousins come over and get to build their own railways and have their own adventures with the toys that helped shape my childhood. When we moved to Texas in 2009, we also began to build up a collection of Playrail and Trackmaster toys. Although that one was only a handful of sets and was sold off sometime later as they took up far too much space and weren't as easy to play with as the Wooden Railway and Tag-Along stuff. I hadn't watched much of the newer airing of Thomas stuff, mainly sticking with the home media we had, until one day, while on a road trip, my parents bought me The Great Discovery and a Take-Along Stanley toy. He is also at a top 10 character for me because of his design. I always loved using Stanley as the stronger, cooler friend of Thomas, and he would always stand up to the big engines or any diesels who tried to bully him. Imagine my disappointment when he was not like this at all as I watched him in things other than The Great Discovery. Speaking of said movie, I was so confused as to why the narrator wasn't one of the usual guys I had heard, those being either of the Michaels, George Carlin, Ringo Starr, or Alec Baldwin. And I also got confused why my mom was so excited when I asked her who this old guy named Pierce Brosnan was. Apparently he played some famous spy named James Bond, I don't know. I will say, I liked Pierce's delivery much more over that of Michael Angelis, who was the US narrator at the time. It's such a shame that they only used his narrations for the movie. His quieter bedtime story style of narration made The Great Discovery feel a lot more personal, which was exactly what he had intended.
I sit in this booth and I have the story in front of me, and I basically tell the story as if I was talking to my own son or daughter, who's 4 or 5. And you try to have as much of an intimate relationship with your voice and the person or the people, the children, the parents who are listening to you.
I then did not see anything else new for Thomas yet again until on another road trip we rented the newest Thomas movie and the first full CGI production, Hero of the Rails. And while still one of my favorite Thomas movies, I would say something felt a little different when watching it that first time. It wasn't the plot or the fact it was CGI, and it definitely wasn't Hero that made me feel different, that's for sure. I absolutely adore his design and who he is as a character. He's so patient and kind with everyone, despite how others treat him. Like, for example, in the movie, after Spencer crashes into the marsh, following his chase with Hero in an attempt to scrap the old engine, Hero doesn't hold a grudge. Once repaired, he happily helps Spencer. I was so excited at the idea of episodes with Hero, but then he left at the end of the movie, and I was disappointed. However, I don't believe that was the reason I got the feeling I did. But I was not in any rush to watch any new CGI Thomas after seeing the movie. I think I ended up watching one episode after that, and it was Charlie and Eddie. You know, that episode where Edward and Charlie are paired up? Yeah, I only watched it because it was on air at my grandma's house. I don't even remember what happened in that episode. I was so uninterested. But that was not the final CGI Thomas thing I watched that year. Oh no. For you see, there was one more movie we rented. And that was the awful, the terrible, the horrible, the evil. Yeah, it was Misty Island Rescue. You probably guessed that. In this movie, I mean, I was around 9 or 10 at the time, and I remember we got it on Redbox, but I don't remember anything I liked about this movie. And that was because of the fact the feeling I first got with Hero of the Rails came back. But what was it? See, the reason I, and many others, fell in love with the show as a kid was because all of it felt real. From the low shots of the engines to give them the size to the stories being more grounded in reality. It was one of the few things I picked up on as a kid with the early model stuff, but never understood until later. Which the lack of those elements is what made that current era of Thomas so uninteresting to me. The show felt less like realistic machines with faces to help learn lessons in a way that can be appreciated by both parent and child, and felt more like a silly show for babies about talking trains, with morals and lessons spelt out explicitly instead of implied, and nothing more than surface level learning. This, tied to the bland, rhymey writing, just made me feel empty. And slowly, but surely, my passion and love for what I would consider to be a defining pillar of my childhood faded away. After watching Misty Island, I stepped back from Thomas. I didn't want any new wooden railway or take-along. I began to not play with what I had as much, and I stopped rewatching the home media we had. Part of this was due to growing up, but the main reason was very clear looking back. I couldn't find a reason to like Thomas, especially now that this new stuff is what would be brought up and thought of if I said I liked it. So, I kept being disinterested. I watched one new thing, and that was The Great Race when it first came out. After finding it on YouTube by complete chance, I thought it was fine. Nothing special. It was definitely better than Misty Island, that's for sure. Ha! But a few weeks later, I forgot about it. And shortly after, Thomas became nothing more than a distant memory of my childhood. I didn't care for the wooden railway or take-along stuff we had anymore. I avoided long conversations about it because I simply didn't care about the show. Sure, I enjoy real-world trains, but lots of people do, so I wasn't that unique. And while I went off into my own life, Thomas stayed behind as a faded and unimportant memory to me. Until one fateful day, something interesting came across my YouTube feed. 2020, a year that I will forever hate. I lost half of my junior year of high school. I was trapped inside all summer and had nothing better to do than lay in bed all day thanks to that one silly thing I can't say or the YouTube algorithm gets a little upset. The only genuine positive I have from that year is I started playing Apex during the extended spring break we all got, and that led to me meeting Flim, Nat, Shy, and Dan, as well as the eventual creation of this channel. But that is an unnecessary note to this story. As August drew near, we were told we would be returning to school in person in a few weeks. Saving grace to me, as I'm a very social person and enjoy being around people I like. Mainly my friends, doesn't matter the setting. Alongside the fact, I'm a very hands-on visual learner. The first month of my senior year went by relatively fine, with nothing of significance occurring. Then one Sunday morning, as I was laying in bed, scrolling YouTube, just big chillin' on the weekend as you do, an odd suggestion came across my video feed, considering I primarily watch gaming content. The Magic Railroad parody, Thomas and Friends, full movie, made by Mr. Conductor Fan 1406. Oh yeah, I remember Thomas. Might as well see what this is about. I've got time to watch this today, I thought to myself. Almost 3 hours later, I finished the video and set my phone down. I took a moment to process what I thought, and well, I thought that was a really good fan project. Kind of wish there was more Thomas stuff to watch that was aimed at an older audience. The Magic Railroad parody, or Tapmar parody, is a fun watch, and I recommend watching it after you finish this video. Keep in mind, though, that there is a disclaimer stating this film is not intended for children at all, so view at your own discretion. However, this was the first instance I had of content that came from the adult Thomas fandom, which may sound odd at first, but in reality it's just a bunch of adults that appreciate an older piece of media and the franchise that came from it. Regardless, Tapmar parody was one of 3 things I came across during my senior year that would start to rekindle my love for Thomas and Friends. The next came a few weeks later, and that was an episode of The Engines of Sodor, a fan series made by Thomas I, Edward II, Henry III, who I will refer to as T1E2H3 from now on. The series mainly takes place after the events of the model series episodes. It was created in trains, using many custom models, and started with a cast of many people voicing the engines. In total, there's 5 main seasons, the Northwestern Railway Origins episodes, and the 3 movies specials. All of these were made by an incredibly dedicated team of adult fans, and you can absolutely tell. Something I appreciate that may go unnoted is the remix T1E2H3 did of many of their earlier episodes. What these aim to do is reduce much of the vulgar language present in the earlier episodes and improve the audio quality by redubbing the episodes solo. While not for everyone, they help the earlier episodes feel more in line with the later seasons, as well as making them not as dated by the crassness of early YouTube. I ended up watching the entire series over the course of my senior year and finished it in March, I'd say. It's pretty good, but if Tapmar parody is a bundle of kindling and the Sodor series is the lighter fluid, all I would need to restart and truly reignite my passion for Thomas would be a lit match. Lo and behold, one came across my feed in April of 2021, although not by rail as the other 2 were. No. This one sailed in on a tugboat that isn't as fortunate as you or I. An unlucky tug, if you will. One day, the YouTube algorithm placed the Unlucky Tug's Big World, Big Adventures Was an Embarrassing Disaster onto my For You page. I tapped it as I was interested in branching out to a new channel that day, as well as having never heard of Big World, Big Adventures, which will be called blah blah from now on. I only got roughly 3 minutes into the video before I knew I would come back frequently. Tug makes a lot of amazing content, varying from his ongoing retrospective series, which covers the entire show, to videos where he just shows off his collection of Thomas merch. His videos covering his model layout and custom realistic versions of the show's characters are part of the reason I wanted to make my own layout. But it was the video on the thing that ended Thomas and Friends that truly reignited my love for the show. If it weren't for these passionate fans who are creating content on something they love as much as I used to, I wouldn't have had a pillar of who I was as a person there anymore. Thomas played a major role in my life growing up, and in recent years as well. In fact, if I had to credit something that wasn't my parents raising me for who I am, I'd have to say Thomas the Tank Engine is my go-to answer. The show taught me at a young age about the joys of friendship, the weight of responsibility, and most importantly, that with enough hard work, anyone can accomplish anything they set their mind to. Simply said, by your number one engine, little engines can do big things. Thanks so much for watching. As of the day this video goes up, Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends turns 40. I wanted to make something celebrating the occasion as well as how the show has impacted my life. I would love to hear how Thomas has impacted you, so be sure to leave a comment sharing how. As for all the creators mentioned during this video, I was sure to include links to all of their channels as well as the 3 specific videos I spoke about. Of course, a video would be dead silent without music, so shout out to Cedrian Afro or SA Music for allowing public use of their recreations for classic Thomas music. I know that this isn't my usual style of content for those familiar with the channel, so we'll be back to business as usual next week. This project just required a little more focus, but if you're new and enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. Have a great day, and I will see you all next time.